Hello, everyone out there. My name is Oliver G. This is the Eiffel Tower podcast. Today's episode is all about how to capture Paris on film. You're about to hear a conversation between me and my brother Eddie G. And it's together with him that we made the last 20 videos about Paris. The idea is a little bit to discuss the creative process of what we went through, a little bit to give suggestions to you guys for how you can do the same thing, how you make your videos better, but also the idea of how Paris changes when you film it over 20 districts. So this is all based on the Paris countdown that we've been doing for the past 5 months, where my wife Lena and I visited every one of Paris's 20 districts for a full day. And in each of those districts, we made a video that's about 5 minutes long, all on YouTube, youtube.com/The Eiffel Tower. I highly recommend you check them out. But this podcast you're about to hear is me in conversation with Eddie. And we recorded it in front of a live online room of viewers on Zoom who hung around for a Q&A at the end. And there's going to be a few more of these exact kind of conversations in the coming weeks. If you want to watch them live, become a Patreon member at patreon.com/The Eiffel Tower. So, here's the chat, me and Eddie talking about videoing Paris. I hope you enjoy it. Hello Eddie, welcome to the studio.
Hello Oliver, it is brilliant to be back.
And you're in Australia, I'm in Europe. Everything is against us for making a podcast episode, but I think we're going to make it work. For those of the listeners who don't know, we've been working together for is it
a whole life, kind of.
Well, in some ways. And on the podcast for a year or two, you've been editing all these videos, and that's what we're going to talk about. And I think the best way to talk about making the videos is how it began. How we collaborated from other sides of the planet to make all these videos and podcast episodes, and how we what we learn about Paris in the journey. So I think we start with the beginning, the 20th hour of this month, and so on. Is it best that I start with how I captured it, or how you start?
Why don't you start? Take it away. It's your podcast.
Okay. Well, I think when we knew that you'd be editing and I'd be filming, and I didn't really know how to capture an hour on this month, I just filmed everything. I just filmed every single thing we did. And in those beginning ones, we did 24 hours. So there was a lot of footage. And I just forwarded it over to you and I said, see what you can do.
I think it started, it was pretty loose. We had the idea that we wanted to do a 20, because we'd done a few other smaller videos together for other little kind of one-off day trips and stuff like that. And then you came up with this idea, and we came up with the idea to video it. And so I think that first one, and I rewatched all of them before we did this. And the first one, you can tell, was we hadn't found our groove yet, because you just filmed everything and sent me, I would say, 200 plus snippets of 2 to 30 second clips, and just said, let's see if we have a good thing here.
And when you look, I'm just sort of to paint the picture, when you receive those 200 clips or whatever, how do you do? Do you just watch them all straight up, or how do you find the plot? Where do you find the storyline?
Well, you do a good job of kind of telling the story, especially because in the beginning, especially, it was like a solid 24 hours, and you had the hotel and stuff. So you saw there was a plot line of living a day, going to bed, and then there was often a kind of morning period. So I would just watch them in chronological order. And at that point, cull anything I didn't like the look of. At the beginning, I didn't cull anything, and then just pieced it together, and then just tightened it right up. So the first cut is usually 10 minutes plus 15 sometimes, and then I just go through and just try and get it to that sweet spot, which is about 5.
So that's good. That's a good follow-up question. How do you decide, and how dare you cut beautiful Paris scenes? What makes you cut a scene?
Well,
for everybody at home, I feel like I only film things that are worth sharing. No, but I mean, I don't just film.
Well, like I said at the beginning, it was harder to gauge because everything was great. But once you're doing 20 videos in the same city, and yes, every arrondissement's different, but essentially there's the similarities. And so pretty quickly I was like, some of these long shots, some of the kind of the full street or down a street shots just could be any arrondissement. Some streets, sure, it's like very notable, but for the most part, or any kind of just like buildings looking up footage all starts to feel the same, which is why I think we started to find direction for the videos and sort of had tips.
I remember that moment because whenever I'm walking around Paris and trying to capture it, which is going to be a sort of plot line that we come back to, the idea of video in Paris, those beautiful old Haussmannian buildings are so photogenic. And I never really thought, even though they're famously uniform, they're all the same shape, size, kind of height, more or less. I always think they're so beautiful. I'm always filming them. And then one day, maybe it was by the 19th or 18th arrondissement, so 2 or 3 in, Eddie just said, stop filming the streets. It doesn't add any personality to the district. And that was interesting. I never thought about it. It adds personality to Paris. And, that would separate if you were going around the world filming in every city because they're so, unique. But it's just too much of the same, wasn't it?
Way too much.
Was there a similar thing in the, because we kind of seek or sort out similar kind of cafes and food and stuff like that. Did you find there was differences in that, or was that all sort of blended?
No, I think, again, on rewatching it, I was like, I kind of wanted to make a food cut or something. I got really interested in the idea of how you could cut all those videos up into their own sort of thematic ones. I want to make an Otis cut. I think that would be really cute. But food, there were so many good meals that you got. I was thinking that when I looked through, I was like, what an amazing, even if you just focus on that, it was an amazing trip, a culinary trip through Paris. And I think there was, because, you got kind of like falafel wraps at some points, you got burgers at some points, and then there's like extreme fine dining and, things on fire. And
that could be a cut, a food around Paris video.
That's what I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
Coffees all were the same though. That's what I noticed looking through. I was like, especially, when you order the same thing at every cafe.
That's true, because I always order the same coffee. But in bars, I guess I order.
You got different drinks, and I respected that.
I think one thing that we haven't talked about that I intended to at the beginning was how because in the beginning when we did that first district, and the streets are sometimes different. Like in the 20th, there was all the street art, for example.
Yeah, for
or when
sure.
you're down by the river, you suddenly got the water side, the quaysides or whatever. Quayside or quayside? Quay.
It's quay.
Quayside.
Quay. Quay.
Yeah. So when I was down there, that was easy. But in those first districts, I was filming everything because I was like, gotta catch everything. But then as time, because we did it like, when you look at the finished product of what we did, just the videos, forgetting the podcast and the photographer and everything, just those videos took an extraordinary amount of planning and organization, so that when we go, choosing even where to sit when we know that the guy's going to be lighting something on fire at dinner. Remembering, this was one thing that we found hard, remembering to film every time we went into a place, because the people at home would want to go, oh, that's what the restaurant looks like. Because if you're walking down the street, the interior of the restaurant, you probably won't even see it. So that idea of, here we are going into the Train Bleu, and then we're inside. And then even like these things of sitting down, showing us sitting down, or the waiter leading us to the table, in terms of being able to make it sort of more of a linear storyline than just suddenly, you go from being on the promenade Plantée, walking along, and then suddenly your food's on fire. It just didn't make sense. Were there times when you were editing? I meant to ask you this before. Times when you were editing where you're like, how the heck am I meant to cut this together? You totally missed the last 4 hours, and now you're underwater.
No, I think everything was shot pretty transitionally correctly, and I think you did a good job of like shooting the outside of the place, and as you said, walking in, and then often a review after you left. So actually that linear nature was pretty easy to keep up with. I also think from your point as well of filming the entrances, there are so many interesting entrances, like a moment through a phone booth, a moment down the stairs to that jazz club, going into the library boat, or the other getting a drink on the boat. There's so many interesting, varied walked, and some of them, like the one I wish I could remember exactly where you walked in and they greeted you and walked you to your table, and like it felt like you were some star of that moment. I think that's
something that in the medium of podcasting or writing a blog or writing a book, you always miss. And I think it's a big flavor of Paris that I haven't been able to share. Exactly what you just said, stepping onto, I mean, we can describe it, you just did, but it's not the same as seeing, like you just said, going down into that jazz club, whereas if you see the video of it, it's like entering the catacombs. We're talking about the Caveau de la Huchette near Shakespeare and Company, just winding down, and then it opens up into this sort of unexpected dancing jazz club. And it's been so cool to be able to share that with people back home, especially, as you said, that there's, like, I think because it's such an old city, like if you compare it to, I don't know, Phoenix, Arizona, I've never even been there. But I imagine that a lot of the places look the same when you walk in. A lot of the buildings maybe look the same when you go in a normal door. Whereas in Paris, they've had to cram things in. Oh, look, we could put a bar down here. Hey, we could put a boat that's a bookshop here. So it was fun to kind of capture that stuff.
I have a question.
Go on.
Can I jump in there? I just thought of this now too. But is there anything that you didn't film that happened that you were like, damn, I wish I caught that on camera? I didn't think about that.
I was just thinking about that. I hadn't told you this. The time that I was the worst at filming, because everyone must remember, especially when we're doing 24 hours, or even the second half where we did the full day, that's a long time to be having to have it in the back of your mind. Yeah. I should be filming or recording. So you often go long periods. It happened a lot where we're like, oh, we should be filming something. But the time I was the worst, every single arrondissement by far, was whenever we had the photographer with us. Because we picked the photographer, usually Augusta, would be there at the most visually like arresting point. So take any of them, for example. Let's say the Trembleau again in the 12th. We should be using different examples every time. Let's say when I was doing the walk through the 5th with Augusta, and we were going to all these beautiful places, past the Panthéon, down the Contrescarpe and Mouffetard and stuff, and that's when I wanted to be filming, but she's taking pictures, and you don't want to be having an iPhone in your hand all the time, so I often forgot about it. Plus, I was often saying to her, because she has such a great eye for photography, and we'll be doing a chat with her just like this soon. And you know that she captures her version of Paris, but it was important to me that she caught the things that I knew I'd be talking about or writing about or whatever. So sometimes, I'd be like, oh, don't miss that, whatever. And I see Paris very differently to how she sees Paris. And she said at the end of it, it's so good when you point out these parts, because I never look at whatever. I'm obsessed with weird things on doorways or whatever. Absolutely. And so we got this big collection of unusual things. So when we were doing that is always when I filmed the least, and that was always when it was the best. So, imagine how good the videos could have been.
How curious. You just reminded me, as you were saying that, about things I cut, and it made me remember that there definitely were bits where you had got over the top filming the things that you're obsessed with, tiny indoors, all those little the things that you like that you...
Chasse rouge.
Yep, them. And I was like, I don't need to see any more of this. I don't think anybody else needs to see. I'll put in 3. There was like 12 to choose from, and I'm like, I get the idea.
I think Augusta was the same. With photography. I'd be like, sometimes because I feel guilty in the end of asking her to take pictures of things that I just think I like. Yeah. So I wouldn't be like, take a picture of that. I'd be like, cool door. And then I'd see if she'd do it. What about... what did you think about the reception to the videos? Now, it's weird with YouTube. It's different from podcasts. Firstly, the podcast has way more listeners than the YouTube channel has viewers, and that's just because this is where we focus all our attention, I think. But suddenly we're doing videos every week. There are a lot of people commenting. There's a lot of people viewing. Were you looking in at how many views each one got, or were you reading the comments and feeling like this one should have been more popular?
I was doing both because I had my favorites and I was super proud of some more than others, and I would kind of check in on them like little babies to see how they were doing. I think that they're all criminally underviewed. I think that this is a video series that should have gone triple platinum on YouTube. Because
maybe it has time.
It could have a second wind, but because I watched all 20 today, my YouTube recommendations have gone crazy with Paris stuff.
Oh, no.
And I clicked on a few, which I'm surprised I hadn't already, but I clicked on a few, and I was watching somebody else's guide to, it was the 7th or something, and I was appalled. I mean, yours wasn't even a guide, but I was just like, what is this? There's so much drivel. Yours / mine are so snappy and so... I don't know. There's a good pace. And
I think there's I think there's something we must talk about is the music makes a big difference.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that in a sec because I want to point out there's something that's quite unfair with YouTube compared to podcast. Everyone who's watching us right now in our live audience are podcast people, I assume, and I think people are quite forgiving when they like a podcast. They'll listen to the next episode. Doesn't matter who the guest is or what the subject is, typically, if you really love a podcast. Whereas with YouTube, I feel everybody in the world watches YouTube videos and they're very easily swayed one way or another, and they're not necessarily going to watch everything in order. And on top of that, something that you didn't have any control over was the title means a lot. So if I had picked a bad title, there's a chance no one would have seen it. And also the thumbnail means a lot, which doesn't matter in podcasts. So I noticed that the 13th arrondissement performed very well compared to the others, which had a big cherry blossom picture on it, a beautiful cherry blossom picture. And I don't think it was representative of the video or of the, cherry blossoms didn't represent the video, and the 13th arrondissement doesn't represent Paris very well. If that was the one that we ranked the least on the whole, I think that
true.
No, in the scores.
Favorite. Right.
Yeah, so our least favorite, even though I like it, was one of the most viewed YouTube videos. And then, of course, everybody knows Montmartre, so everybody clicks on the Montmartre video, not necessarily meaning that it's good.
That one, I think, is the best, though. I was thinking that in my watching, not to jump ahead, because I have a sneaking suspicion you were going to ask if I had a favorite. But I noted it when I rewatched it that it had the most views, and I was like, why does this one have the most views? And I watched it and I was like, oh, I know exactly why this one has the most views. It was so
why?
good.
Because it's the best.
It's just, it's so good. It's so beautiful. I believe that one starts, you had just a good day. Everything was perfect. The music was also really good, if we want to talk about music, because... Perfect.
Let's bring us back to the music, and I'll paint the scene. We're going to talk to Press, the musician, in one of these chats in the coming weeks. But the story of how that came about, and we'll get into that more. I want to hear it from his perspective even. But that first episode, we were in Le Vieux Belleville, the Edith Piaf singing fun restaurant, which I know a lot of the listeners to the show have gone to since, because people often email me to say that they enjoyed it. It's like a surprise package, that one. And I'd recorded a lot of the music from there, of them singing, of us singing, and it made such a nice difference to the podcast, right? And then by chance, when we went to the 19th, we went to the Philharmonic Orchestra, which amazing. I recorded the sound of. Yeah. And then we had music for that one. And I was like, this is adding such a dimension to the podcast episodes and the videos, because we have original music. So by the time we got to the 18th, which is Montmartre and all the famous old poets and singers and artists and everyone has waxed lyrical about it in music before, I was like, it'll be easy to get music from here. And so my first thought was to ask my father-in-law, who plays instruments. I was like, do you mind just doing a little rendition of, he loves French music too. I said something very Montmartre. And he played La Bohème on the piano, but a very stripped-back version, probably one hand. I can't really remember. And he was really excited to be on the podcast and on the YouTube videos. And then when I got to the 17th, I was about to ask him again, but then I remembered, and I'll tell the story properly later, but I remembered Press Maxon is a huge fan of the show and
hugely talented,
absurdly talented. Yeah, he plays 50 instruments. And so I happened to ask both my father-in-law and Press at the same time to make a song. And then Press delivered something that just blew everybody's brain. And I had to fire my father-in-law from the podcast. But do you remember that moment of the 17th comes along and suddenly we have an original song, a whole soundtrack, and how that made for editing videos? And does it actually add to a video?
I think hugely, because the hardest part actually is is finding music that fits, especially because you're so limited with, being able to use what you can use, and you have to use royalty-free music. And
I was going to say, explain that. Some people might not know about the whole royalty-free thing.
Well, your video, if you just put whatever song you want, which if you could, you'd have, such a great time. But if you don't have the license for the music you're using, YouTube will flag it and take it down. So that's why you can't just pop in, Britney Spears. But you can find someone that is incredibly talented and can make original scores. And that is what we did. And the difference, the songs that I found for the first few videos were fitting and nice. But once they got so personalized as they are, it changed the game completely. Completely.
And we don't need to get too much into what he did, because we'll do that later. But did you find that it fit with the districts, or was that was kind of just random?
I think they all fit because they all had like a little Parisian flair to them, whether it was accordion or whatever. But I made them fit what we had. Like I'd edit the video to fit the music, because also, as you heard in the podcast, he was doing all sorts of different things and splitting it up. The first half of the song is like this, then it changes to this halfway through, then it changes to that, which could be a challenge if you're trying to tell a kind of similar story. But if you edit to the sound, you can get some pretty magical moments. And there were some moments that I was super proud of, specifically the Rodin Museum. The Rodin Museum, that's my highlight of a lot of the videos. Maybe one of my favorite segments is the Rodin Museum segment. And he had this beautiful little like tinkling piano bit that I was like, where in the video is this going to work? And then there was the bit as you were filming past a hedge to reveal the thinker. And I saved it for that moment, and it just went in perfectly. And then I don't know. You'll have to go and watch it to see what I'm talking about.
For the musically gifted or musically lacking among us, trying to imagine this tinkling piano sound, can you give us an imitation so that we can picture it? Okay, we're coming past the hedge.
It's kind of like that.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was beautiful.
And there was some other times well, no, we can find it. It's in the 7th video, but the 7th hour in this month. But I remember there were other times where you timed it so perfectly with someone spinning or walking downstairs or whatever, and the music just goes really nicely. And that's actually why I asked you to edit them, because everybody doesn't know Eddie used to make these travel videos when he traveled around. There was no speaking in it like I've done in my ones, but it was just collections of 2-3 second clips of him being around the world, just fit beautifully to music.
There's one that was Paris when I came and visited you, because I did London, Paris, and Berlin one year. And I was like, I just want to capture this on video, and I did that and put it to music. And so we worked together, one of the original ones, a long, long time ago.
And so hopefully I'll be doing more videos that you'll be able to edit and add your magic to. But I want to flip it a bit and talk about, there's definitely people watching and listening who record videos when they come to Paris. And I wondered if together we could give them some sort of insights after filming the entire city and making videos of, first, if it's hard to make their own little nice memory videos, and secondly, any tips on filming. So together, I think, why don't you start with if it's
I can answer the first question. No, it's not hard. I don't think it's hard to capture a city like Paris beautifully and result in something that you can have forever. The editing can be confusing if you don't know how to edit anything, but also these days with apps and stuff, and there's so many. I don't use TikTok, but I know that when you make it helps you. Like you can auto sync it to sounds and stuff. So if you just have the footage, there's ways that you can do it. But shooting it, I feel like that's the easiest bit, because it's just all there.
Going to say, yeah, I think that can be a difficulty with Paris, is that everything is so beautiful, pretty much, that it's hard to know where to focus. Perfect example, I went on a Seine River cruise the other day.
Yeah.
And it was hard to know where to take pictures and videos. I did an Instagram story for it. But everything was nice. So it was an hour of good stuff. So where do you just, do you just film the monuments, or do you film, what stands out?
My tip for that is I would say film it all, but I would say film it all differently. you know, make sure you get some like panning shots of the beautiful view that you're getting, but then also get some like really close-ups of the bridges you go under and the details on the boat and stuff like that. And I think
that was one of Eddie's feedbacks early on, was he said get more close-ups, because I tend to admire the beauty from a distance, and then I think there'd be a noticeable difference later in the sort of where I started going for ultra close-ups of things.
Because there's so many beautiful tiny details, like little mosaic moments, mosaic street signs, tiled floors of on the entry into like a boulangerie that you wouldn't even think to look down because you're looking at the food you're about to get, but the beautiful little moments like that. Paintings also, that's
what I was going to say. When you go to and this works for photography too, but if you're in the Louvre, I don't want to say the Mona Lisa, if you're looking in the Petit Palais looking at this beautiful picture that I love called Les Halles, the big markets, the belly of Paris, there's this painting that's enormous. Like it'd take you 10 steps to walk from one side to the other of it. And I'd say everybody probably takes a picture of it,
the whole thing,
from 10 steps back. Whereas if you go close and do a little pan past their faces, or take a photo of one of the details or one of the market vendors or whatever, it adds a whole dimension to it. And that's what we sort of started finding with the videos as we went on.
I also think that's like a service to the artist, because you get to see the brushstrokes, you get to see the detail, especially some of the faces of even some Van Goghs. I think that you got some really these beautiful brushstrokes and kind of expression that gets captured that you just wouldn't if you're getting these full pan shots, which is how I would think to shoot if you saw an amazing painting, get the whole thing.
May I add something to this?
I would love you to add something to this.
I think two things. One is everybody, typically when people film who don't film very much, so if you're listening to this and you like to take the occasional video when you're in Paris or wherever, typically people film for way too long.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
I'm not going to name any names ever in this kind of comment, but someone once went on a cruise ship holiday and wanted to show me what they'd captured, and it was 30 seconds to a minute in every room of the cruise ship, slow pans.
Who was it?
I can't say, but I was in a position where I had to be I had to be polite and watch a minute, and I was sitting there the whole time thinking, I can't do this. I can't, and I had to comment on each one too. So I was saying, magnificent. And then the next one I said, wow, I didn't know casinos could be that big. Every single thing. Whereas when I was filming these, I don't think I tried to keep 3 seconds at a maximum, which is all you really need to get an idea of anything.
2 seconds is the...
Yeah.
It would actually be really interesting to talk to Prez about this. Because the way, I don't understand it musically, but very often the beats seem to change in a lot of the songs. Every 2 seconds, a drum will go or something like that, and that's in most songs unless it's super slow. But I don't even know the words for it. But the amount of times that something happens and how often it does, you can cut to that. And very often in songs and everything, it's quick, and people's attention spans aren't that long.
I would recommend that you join the Zoom chat with Press.
That'd be cool. Oh, maybe you'll see
also, and you also said you wanted to ask me a question. We got a few questions that we're going to answer before we open this up to a full Q&A. But I want to add one last thing on the filming thing. Is film landscape makes a big difference, as in sideways, horizontal. If you want to show people what you videoed, especially if you're on a computer or you're rigging it up to the television, and Paris too is very landscape. I feel, with that big river in the middle and so on.
I agree. I also have one last tip. If I had to make a good video, I just remembered it was the tip that I told you. It was in a few moments of Lena had these little moments of motion that were kind of light and fun, just, in front of something amazing and doing a little pose, doing a little something. And I clocked that was so much more interesting than just someone, standing in front of the viewer or anything. But to create your own sense of motion in the scene, I think is really crucial. Anything that moves, get that. A bird flying, capture that.
I think as well, for people at home, if they do a trip to Paris, I would love if typical tourists who travel around whatever, instead of saying, here are my 7,000 photos or here are my 50 videos of the cruise ship, imagine if people shared a 2-minute video full of 2-second things. That's next level. I think everybody would like that.
I think so.
And that's what we tried to provide. I've got some questions that people sent in via Patreon that I'm going to read for us both. I think they're kind of a bit more targeted towards me, but you've got experience with this stuff too. Carl Beam, he writes, question, sort of.
I like it.
He says, I'd like to hear your thoughts on filming in private/semi-private spaces. I think the behind-the-door scenes in those filmed in private lanes are some of the most compelling. I'm curious how you weigh the factors for and against entering and sharing. This question is not intended to imply any disapproval. I think you know that. And of course, I didn't even sense any disapproval, but I get how they could be. It could be ready to, but it's a good one. Private and semi-private places. I think the main thing is everything in Paris, things like courtyards, private stuff like that, they were built to be enjoyed and seen. And especially in the old days, you could walk into a lot of those courtyards when they were built, and now someone's put a digicode out the front of it and you can't appreciate it. I think even the people who live in these places are really happy to share it. You know, like the first place I lived in the second arrondissement had this amazing entry. We featured it in the second video. You can see me opening the door and going in.
Yeah.
I didn't own it, but I wanted to share it, even though, you know, and I lived there. But I don't know. I think part of me is like, I know this will make the video better, showing something that's sort of secret and private and not just the same as everybody else shares. But like, really, I think everything has been made to be seen. If it was extremely private and it said, don't video in here, please, like it says in some places in Paris, no videos, whatever, fair enough. I usually wouldn't do it.
I think if somebody doesn't want to be filmed, or somebody doesn't want some place filmed, they'll let you know. And I think so. You might as well just do it and wait to be asked. What is it? Ask permission later.
Ask forgiveness.
There you go.
Ask forgiveness. Yeah, it's funny because the other question that came through, Linda Rothrock said, if I were able to join, I'd ask this: when you take photos or videos where people might be captured, do you ask their permission first? And the answer is no, because like Eddie said, if it's, you know, I wouldn't go and film people sitting on a cafe terrace up close. Never, I would never do that. But if you're filming in Paris, people are going to be in the background. There's no way around it, essentially. So you can't go and ask everyone in the background if they mind being in the shot. But there are definitely people who don't like being filmed, and they'll sometimes come up and be like, hey, are you filming? I don't want to be in this. They're also legal, you can legally film in public in France, so it's not a concern that I had when I was filming. In fact, I wanted it to feel like everybody was there with us. On that note, Eddie, you did a fantastic job of editing the videos, and you continue to do a fantastic job of editing the podcast. So I look forward to working with you in the future. Do you mind hanging around while we can talk to some people here on Zoom and hear their questions too?
I would love to hang around and chat.
Okay, well, thank you for the podcast.
Thank you. See you on the other side.
Thanks to Press Maxon for the music. Thanks to Eddie G for being my guest. One thing we touched on in that conversation that I didn't bring up until the Q&A afterwards, I asked Eddie for his favorite 3 districts based on the videos. He said it was the 7th, then the 11th, and then the 18th. So Montmartre. And what followed was half an hour of lively questions and answers from people all over the world. Really fun. You can watch the replay if you sign up on Patreon. That's patreon.com/the-earful-tower. Or you can watch these upcoming conversations. There'll be one with Augusta the photographer, Press the musician, and one final chat to rule them all with Lena, my wife. And then it'll be back to programming as usual. You might have noticed last week there was no podcast episode. That's because I was working around the clock on our new children's book, Grace the Giraffe in Paris. A huge thanks to everybody who supported the Kickstarter. It went off. It caught on fire, really. It was amazing. Thank you so much, everybody else. If you want to get a copy on the pre-sales, there's still time to get in on that initial post-run, theearfultower.com/grace. And indeed, if you want to get our guide to Paris, if you want to get the other books, theearfultower.com/shop. I'll leave it to you. Hopefully see you for the next Zoom. The next one's going to be at a time that's conducive to American viewing. I expect the crowd to be very big. So maybe I'll see you there. One more time, patreon.com Facebook.com/The Earful Tower. Happy filming, everybody, and thank you for listening.